Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Secrets of a Good Life show with me, Ruqia Zafar.
And myself, Madhia Jaral.
And you are listening to us on Salam Radio on 106.2 FM. And we're coming to you today with a very interesting show. We had fun discussing it when we were planning it, actually, on forgiveness. And we put a poll up on Instagram. Madhia, do you want to share the results of that?
Oh, yeah, I was actually just pulling out the results. It's actually quite interesting because I was expecting it to be, skewed one way. But this is really balanced. Let me just go on to my Instagram for the latest update. So, yeah, it still stands at... So the question, the question I asked on the Instagram, on my Instagram page is, does everyone deserve forgiveness? And 55% said yes. But 45% said no. So literally it's, half and half split. So this makes it really interesting because we obviously have very strong views as to whether everyone deserves forgiveness or not. And so that's, this is why our conversation in prepping for this was really interesting, because there were lots of moral issues that came to surface. Yeah. And and we noticed that there are going to be lots of moral dilemmas that people are going to be faced with when deciding whether they want to forgive, a perpetrator. And so this is what today's show,
Just to clarify, what we didn't mean is whether everyone deserves forgiveness from Allah. That's not something we can comment on. That's Allah's affair, not ours. We're talking about whether everyone who's done something some harm against somebody else, do they deserve forgiveness from that person? That's what the poll was.
So one human to another, essentially what we're saying. So really the question we're asking is, should we see all violations of faith and trust as forgivable? Or are there some things that are simply unforgivable? So we've got Asim in the in the studio saying yes. Is that yes, they should all be forgiven? Oh, so now I think we've balanced. Now we're 50-50. So
we should get Asim on the show.
And we might actually call him later, and he can present that side of the view. Maybe let's see what happens.
Oh, we've given it away though.
Okay, so before we go in, so this is this is actually a sensitive topic, and because some of the issues we're going to be talking about are actually very sensitive and very serious issues, and we're not here considering just light matters of forgiveness, whether someone's, spoken about you behind your back negatively or says something to hurt you. We're actually today talking about forgiveness that actually also entails abuse. And we're talking about physical abuse. We're talking about violations. We're talking about violence. We're talking about abuse that has led to a person feeling violated, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically. And the violation has led to trauma.
Right. And so it's really important, actually, that in order to understand what we're saying, that in context, please don't take any one part of this show and listen to just that, because I think it's going to be really important to hear the everything that we're saying here, because it's going to put a lot of things into perspective and into a context. Otherwise, little snippets of it could mean things of two people that we really didn't intend, and actually we wouldn't want to be in a position where anybody
is encouraged a certain way that isn't healthy for them. And on that note, the decision obviously always lies with you. You must do what feels right. Having judged your situation, your individual situation and your individual life and experience, you must decide whether you are going to forgive or not. We're here, and whether you're ready. And we're just here to open a discussion to get us thinking about it. And that's what we're doing. And to do this, what we're going to start off with is actually looking at forgiveness. There's actually lots of different ideas of what forgiveness is and what forgiveness should look like. But we want to actually start off with what forgiveness is not.
So often people have this idea of, I think we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail later, but the idea of forgive and forget. And we were clear when we were discussing this that that's not what we mean. Often people think that forgiving someone means that you have to reconcile with that person, or that you have to allow them back into your life, or that you are back in a position where that person has an opportunity again to repeat whatever the behavior was. It doesn't mean any of those things. we'll go into that now, inshallah.
Yeah, because what we, and just to kind of reiterate what you're saying, Dr. Ruqia, is that when people are forgiving, or when people are expected to forgive, there's this added subconscious expectation that there's absolution of the action. But actually, we do not forget, and we do not pretend that that action didn't take place. And so if someone's done something really thoughtless, and someone's violated your, your
sense of safety,
trust, you feel betrayed, and, violated physically possibly, then you're going to look at that person differently. And so to expect you not to forget, to expect you to forget that is not acceptable, because it's asking of you to erase a memory that played a very big part in your life and in forming and shaping you. And that's not okay.
No.
It is never okay. Forgive and forget is not okay. Forgive, yes, we can have a discussion about. But forget is not okay, because even if the violation is, small violation. I'm just going to give an example. It doesn't mean this example is small, but it could be considered small. Let's say you pass someone in the street and they, swear at you, they throw some sort of abuse at you. Depending on obviously your situation, it might be quite serious, but assume that it's not a serious violation. That experience is actually going to shape you. It's going to shape your thought, it's going to shape your words, and it's going to shape your actions, because there's never an experience that doesn't contribute to how we perceive this world and how we perceive people and how we perceive relationships. And so when a violation occurs or something occurs that requires a forgiveness, then that experience has and does contribute to your perspective on life and what kind of framework you use to live your life.
And that's, there's nothing wrong with that at all, because this is how we learn
wrong with what?
For that to shape your perspective on life or how you perceive the world, because that's how we learn what's safe and what isn't, and who's trustworthy and who isn't.
And how to judge whether someone's trustworthy
exactly.
or not. And just an example is, I just remembered a client, businesswoman, and she made some business decisions in the past, with family that actually she paid a heavy price for. In terms of the relationships she had with them afterwards, things just turned really bitter and sour. And now, moving forward, she had some business opportunities, and she's really excited about them, but she's also frightened because of that sour experience. Now, what she doesn't want is, number one, to pretend that didn't happen and go full force into a new business venture without any consideration. But neither does she want the polar opposite, and that's not to experience any or take any risks because of the past bitter experience.
Right. What we want is to learn a lesson from the experience and use it to help us develop and to move forward.
To build a framework, essentially.
Right, exactly.
With which, and that's what we did together, actually. We built a framework on which you can base a judgment and assess whether this business venture is one to go ahead with and one to not. And these are life skills, because then she can apply this to different aspects of her life. And that is why we cannot forget or expect others, especially children. And you hear, mothers say this quite often, is that just forgive, just forget, just pretend it didn't happen, just move on. And actually, that's almost stealing. It's almost like theft. You're stealing an experience from them from which they're actually supposed to take some learning, and you're preventing that from happening. And so when your child is in another situation or grows up, a couple of years later, and you notice that this child is not able to make decisions that are healthy for them, you need to go back and find out why. And the chances are the opportunities of learning like these, when they were violated, not to say they're the only opportunities, it's just because we're talking about forgiveness, we're talking about violations, that you ask that child to forget it, as opposed to learning from it and learning to make better decisions in the future.
What you've also done to the child in that situation is you've taken away their trust of their intuition. And understanding their own feelings and emotions and trusting those. What you've done to that child is said, yes, you felt this way about it, but that doesn't matter. What's going to happen is, as the child becomes older, they're going to be in situations where they're going to perhaps mistrust someone for good reason, but they're going to override that because that's what they've learned.
That's their learned behavior. Absolutely fantastic point there. So just recapping what forgiveness is not. Number one, forgiveness is not something that you forget. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. It can be, but it does not mean definitively that it's reconciliation. Forgiveness does not mean that what has happened is right. Forgiveness does not mean that we erase the memory of the past. Sorry?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to list it all, but please.
I was just going through the list as well. I was going to say, and it does not mean that you allow people to repeat a behavior.
Yeah. Go on, you can do the next one as well.
Right,
since you started the...
Okay. And it's also not pretending or convincing yourself that the offense didn't take place in the first place, or that it didn't have an impact on you, sort of playing it down.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big deal. If it was a big deal, it was a big deal. So forgiveness does not mean that you take away that validation of the impact that it's had on you. And forgiveness is not a feeling.
It's not a feeling.
It's not a feeling. It's actually an action. And there's a lot that has to be processed before you get to the action. And finally, forgiveness is not easy.
Not by any stretch of the imagination.
And it takes courage.
And it takes time, which we're going to look at and speak about in a little while. But forgiveness is actually a whole process. And what you'll also notice that it's a repetitive process. Sometimes you have to forgive, like on a regular daily or even daily basis, just to get to that point where you feel like maybe there's some sort of detachment. And that's what we're going to talk about later. So, Dr. Ruqia, we've looked at what forgiveness is not. Can we have a look at what forgiveness is?
Sure. But before we go into that, there's one thing you want to say. There are some things that are just simply too horrible to forgive. Certainly too horrible to forget. We've already discussed that, really, that even with things that are not too horrible to forgive, you might forgive them, but it doesn't mean you forget them. But there are some things that are just too horrible to forgive. And we've briefly mentioned that already.
We're talking about violations that are of the physical body, emotions, mentally, violence,
abuse in any form.
Real abuse in any form. And these are simply too traumatic of an experience to expect the victim to forgive the perpetrator. Although there are some interesting cases where people have, forgiven people who, for example, murdered their child. Yeah.
For example. And I remember recently there was a case in America where a Muslim woman forgave the guy who had murdered her son.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's amazing, spiritually, that level, to get to that point where you're able to forgive the murderer of your child is something that most of us just can't imagine even. But I think we do have to understand that these are exceptional situations and exceptional people.
And we say exceptional people. Also want to I just thought maybe we should separate. I mean, this is kind of like a moral discussion, and there's lots of moral dilemmas here that we are going to be faced with and try to assess. But what we don't want you to think that to forgive someone who has abused you makes you exceptional.
Actually,
yeah,
that's
right.
True. Good point. Yeah.
So we're going to separate ourselves from the woman, the mother. And I don't want to pass any judgment on how difficult it may or may not have been for her. I'm a mother myself, and to lose a son, and for her to even be composed, let alone forgive, is just extremely inspiring and interesting. But that's not to say that to forgive makes you an exceptional person. You can withhold forgiveness and still be an exceptional person.
Yeah.
Because forgiveness is a journey. And you know what impact the abuse had upon you. And I don't want anyone to be hard on themselves at home because they're struggling to forgive someone who violated them or caused them any abuse and think that there's something wrong with them. No, it is absolutely necessary that you continue to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. If your feeling is that this person should not be forgiven, and really I'm talking about abuse, it could be like I'm just conscious of the time of the show. There might be children listening to this show, so I just don't want to mention certain forms of abuse.
Violation of body, violation of trust.
Yeah. So those kind of abuse, particularly, and we've experienced this with our clients, is to expect them to forgive because that makes you a person of great superiority. No. That violation stole from you your trust, your safety, your ability to make judgments. And we know clients who have spent decades of their life struggling with relationships and struggling with work because of physical violations that
from childhood
particularly, not just childhood, but particularly caused detrimental harm. So for those of you or know of anyone or have experienced that, this is not a judgment or an expectation on you to forgive the perpetrator.
And I guess that's the point, that those situations where we've seen people who've done that that's not the norm. No. And it shouldn't be pushed as, well, people have done this, why can't you?
Oh, it's happened to other people, you mean?
Other people, it's happened to other people and they like the situation we're talking about, the woman who forgave
if she can forgive the murder of a son, you can forgive.
You can,
no,
somebody's violated.
That's really unfair. We're going to be talking about forcing and putting someone in a position where they feel, almost like emotionally manipulated and blackmailed to forgive and even forget. We're going to talk about that. But let's, shall we talk about what forgiveness is? And then we can talk about
let's do that.
So there are some things that you really want to forgive and you want to move past, and so this often happens in relationships, and whether it's husband, wife, or children, or a colleague, just close friends, just close relations, people that you interact with on a regular basis, and they may have violated you in some way. Maybe they were harsh with you, maybe they didn't understand you, maybe they had an expectation of you that was too much, maybe they made you feel like you're not enough. They did something for you to feel bad about yourself or left you feeling worse. These are usually people that you want to maintain a future relationship with, and these are people who don't mean harm to you, but we're human, we make mistakes, and so we need opportunity to rectify ourselves. And these are people who are often feeling remorse, and they make effort not to repeat their behavior. So that is where forgiveness becomes really relevant, and forgiveness is important. And I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier than some of the extreme situations that we have just spoken about.
Yeah. And in these situations, I think one of the things, again, this is something that we are going to go into a little bit more later, is that it's about you.
Yeah.
It's about the impact that the situation has had on you, and the impact holding on to it has had on you, and the impact letting go of it through forgiveness might have on you.
Yeah, it's about what you want, essentially. If you want to make the relationship work, you find a place of collaboration where both parties sit and understand each other's needs, and then you collaborate until you reach a point where you're both happy with the outcome.
But even in a situation where you don't want a relationship with a particular person,
that's a good point,
you can still forgive that person and move on, again, for your own health, for your own benefit, while at the same time recognizing, but that doesn't mean that I want to go back into a relationship with that person. What you're doing there is you're letting go of the impact that it's having on you. You're letting that go now. You're not allowing it to hold you back anymore. You've processed it, you've moved on, but you've also realized that this person doesn't deserve a place in your life now, or that you can't have the same kind of relationship with them now.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've kind of like summarized much of what forgiveness is. Just to add a little bit is forgiveness is, for those of us who are of a religion, the main world religions do say that forgiveness is an act of obedience to God. And that forgiveness gives you freedom. And it actually closes the gaping wounds. Although the scars remain, and that's how we were speaking about not forgetting, but it does close the wounds.
And it gives you a sense of freedom, of letting go, and setting healthy boundaries that keep you safe,
yeah,
and keep you happy. but without being chained by the event or by the whatever it was the perpetrator that had done to you, or whatever had gone wrong in the relationship. Moving on from that, letting go, essentially. That word kept coming, that phrase kept coming up, letting go.
We're going to talk about that in a moment, letting go and healing and freedom, etc. But just to kind of like look at this again, as to what forgiveness is there's a scale, right? Let's say there's a scale of atrocities on one side and misunderstandings on the other side.
Right. It's a huge spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So there's a huge spectrum, and so for different people, we have had different experiences. Some experiences for us are on the end where it's a misunderstanding, and other people have had experiences that are clear atrocities. And you have to decide. I mean, we're all different. For all of us, for our different relationships, we're on different parts of that spectrum, and we have to decide at what point of the spectrum we're saying this is not something I'm ready to forgive or willing to forgive. And
that's very individual.
Yeah.
That's, again, not something that anybody else can decide for someone else, whether something is a forgivable act or not. It's completely individual. And, the factors that decide whether you think something is forgivable or not isn't just the act itself, but there's your whole background and what you've experienced before.
What it means to you, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not the action that determines whether that person should be forgiven or not, but rather the impact it's had on you.
Yeah. And where you are in your healing journey. Because if we're at a point where we haven't actually processed the wounds from it, to try and forgive at that point and try and coerce yourself into forgiving at that point can actually sometimes do more harm than good.
We're going to look at that in greater detail in a little while, but we've spoken a little bit about what forgiveness is. We've spoken about what forgiveness is not. We've mentioned some cases where forgiveness, is really not on the table. It's not on the cards.
Yeah.
And there are situations where forgiveness does take place and can take place and should really take place. But what we want to look at now is what happens to us in our body when we choose not to forgive. Again, this is not to pass a judgment on anyone who is choosing not to forgive a perpetrator, but we just want you to be aware of what happens to your body when you are holding on to an experience, holding on to a trauma, and the impact it has. So, when I was doing this Instagram post, and I asked the question, whether everyone deserves forgiveness, and I know what perspective people were looking at to say no. It's like, I've been wronged, and if I forgive this person, then it's almost like this person's not been brought to justice, and it's okay for this person to do what they've done. But actually, when we're looking at forgiveness, we're not looking at that. And I wonder if the people that voted yes were looking at forgiveness with a second perspective, which you've mentioned, and that's the perspective of letting go. So forgiveness, not in the sense of, what we've discussed, forgiveness is not like the forgetting, the reconciling, the pretending it was okay or it didn't happen, but rather just the act of you letting go of that person. And the reason is that the abuse that happened in the past is still hurting you in the present and holding you back.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference between seeing things as forgivable, but also having those things consuming your life.
Yeah.
So if you're very upset and agitated about a conflict, we know people get into this parasympathetic mode, don't they? Did you want to just mention what they are?
Yeah, so this comes up in every show.
I hope you've memorized it by now.
I think
Shall we ask
have
them?
it.
Shall we ask for that? He's saying no. He's shaking his head.
So
for next week.
Yeah, remember it. Okay. So the parasympathetic state, we've mentioned this already. This is fight or flight, mode of our nervous system. It has perhaps two other...
Brother Asim is nodding. He remembers now.
He remembers now. So
we'll put it down to our questions. We've got 50 seconds, by the way. Did you want to just share them and then we'll come back and explain?
Yeah, fight to flight, freeze or fawn. These are states of the nervous system where we perceive ourselves to be in immense danger.
In immense danger, yes.
And so your body, your nervous system is preparing you to deal with that danger in some way. And the fight or flight is where you're actually in a state of needing to do something. And the fawn and the freeze is where you feel it's too great for you to actually do anything about it.
And so, as the name suggests, you freeze or fawn.
Where you sort of start people-pleasing and...
trying to appease the situation by pleasing people. And so we're going to go into details as to what these four mean in the context of forgiveness. We're going to go to a break. Please stay tuned. Come back where we talk about how forgiveness impacts your body physically. Stay tuned. Speak to you soon.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.
हाँ बिलाल, मैं हमारी ग्रोसरी और हलाल मीट के लिए मुख्तलिफ स्टोर्स पर जाते जाते थक चुकी हूँ। पार्किंग हमेशा से एक मसला रहा है और मुझे आखिरी बार एक पार्किंग टिकट भी मिला है।
कितनी दफा बता चुका हूँ, 232 लिंकन रोड पीटरबरो पर पार्क फूड्स को ट्राई करो। ये कैम्ब्रिजशायर की सबसे बड़ी एथनिक सुपरमार्केट है और उनके पास 1 घंटे के लिए फ्री कस्टमर कार पार्क है।
वाओ, रियली? लेकिन क्या मैं वहाँ से सब कुछ खरीद सकती हूँ?
यस, fresh quality fruit, vegetables, dairy product, halal meat and poultry delivered every day. It really is a one-stop shop. Plus, Park Foods carry a huge range of brands from around the world and thousands of products in their daily use household range.
मैं अभी जाना चाहती हूँ। वो कब तक खुलते हैं?
Monday to Saturday, 8:30 to 8 p.m. and 11 to 5 p.m. on Sunday. और ये बहुत ही साफ और महफूज है और कोविड गाइडलाइंस को फॉलो किया जाता है। तो फिर चलें, शाजिया।
Park Foods. Come and see the difference.
Peterborough. Who said good quality fried and grilled chicken has to be expensive? At Sam's, we take pride in every piece of chicken that leaves our kitchen. Just one bite of our chicken or burgers is all it takes to realise we are the best. Visit us at our brand new place at 333 Lincoln Road, PE1 2PF. Or order a delivery through Just Eat, Uber or Deliveroo. Sam's, the home of great tasting chicken for over 30 years.
It's estimated that 5,760 children become orphaned every day, and the numbers are rising. UKIM ensures that the orphans we sponsor receive healthcare, food, education and shelter to show them that there are people who care. This Ramadan, from just £30 per month, you can make a real change in an orphan's life. Your sponsorship will provide them with much needed essentials to ease their situation. For orphan sponsorship, call now or visit ukim.org.
दोस्ता की परेशान है
जरा कर है ना सारा सौदा मुक्या वा मुल्का विच पैसे भेजने
हूं नहीं मार फूड वाले की फोन कड़का ते फ्री लोकल डिलीवरी कार मंगवा
आलाता उथे कै स्पेशल आ
ओना की लबाई हाइजीनिक ग्रेड 5 चीजें चंगियां म्यारी ते सस्तियां ते नाले ऑफर ही ऑफर
और क्या
ताजा गोश्त ताजी सब्जियां ते फ्रूट आटा चावल दालां मसाले ते जूस सारे बिल जमा करने गैस ते इलेक्ट्रिक नो टॉप अप भी करने पाकिस्तान पैसे बिल्कुल फ्री भेजने मतलब के एक चिड़ी ने दूध छड़ी ते हर शय लबनी
अठ जने ने आप उतरा Amar Food Store and Halal Meat 613B Lincoln Road Peterborough telephone 01733 687374
महानूर मजीद हूँ और कोर्ट मेरा एक खूबसूरत आशियाना है जहाँ मेरे जैसे हज़ारों यतीम और बेसहारा बच्चों की कफालत बेहतरीन अंदाज में की जा रही है। आएं हमारे सरों पर दस्ते शफकत रखें और इस माह रमज़ान अपने सदक़ात खैरात और एहतियात से हमारी कफालत में अपना हिस्सा डालें। अल्लाह पाक आपका दिया हुआ माल अपनी बारगाह में कबूल फरमाए, आमीन।
कोर्ट UK ऑफिस
0300 123 774 court.org.uk।
Peterborough's community radio station, Salam Radio, 106.2 FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Secrets of a Good Life show on Salam Radio 106.2 FM. And we were having a very interesting discussion in the break, which we'll go into now. But first, let's let people know how they can contribute to the discussion themselves.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences about forgiveness and whether there's anything that we've said that you agree or disagree with. So please do call in on 01733 602 133. You can text on 07411 191062 or comment on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter or Twitch.
Still don't know what Twitch is.
Do I say it like confidently as if I know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So I say Facebook and Twitch in the same way. We should have a look to see what it's about, right?
Probably.
Although, Facebook, YouTube. Oh, there's no Instagram, I just noticed. But anyway. So,
anyway,
yeah, the discussion.
discussion.
We're having a break time.
The discussion we were having, Brother Asim came in and he said that he's noticed that in our community, so we're talking the Pakistani Muslim community, there's a lot of...
Or even the Indian subcontinent, you could say. I could say that, we all fall into the same sort of culture, really.
Yeah, no, that's true. I just limited to that because all three of us are, I assume, are Pakistani.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so what he mentioned was that he's noticed that in the community there's a lot of not letting go of something or not forgiving something on a point of principle. So, it's a principle of the matter. I'm not going to let it go. And so that, that was kind of his experience. And
he did add also, though, that he would forgive but not forget. And what that means is that he wouldn't maintain or continue the same relationship. The relationship would definitely change, which is sensible and which is what we were talking about, right? That experiences form our perspectives, and our perspectives form our framework in which we'll deal with life, essentially.
And what we were saying was, okay, that's one aspect of this whole topic that we see in the community, but the other aspect that we've had a lot of exposure to in the work that we do, which is really shocking, is...
And very sensitive issue. But I think it's so important that we actually speak about this openly, because I think it's brushed under the carpet.
Too often
at the detriment of people.
Vulnerable people.
Very vulnerable people.
And that's when there has been an extreme violation, bodily violation, and I'm going to just be aware of the time and that children might be listening in, but I'm sure people will understand what we mean by this.
What we're referring to, yeah.
We see this very often in our work where someone has a background where this has happened in their childhood. It's very, very common now, both against girls and boys.
Yeah.
And usually it's happened within a family context, so it's a relative or sometimes it's even an older child. And what we find in the work that we do is for most of the clients we've had where this has been an issue, where it's happened, their families have told them to just forget it. Pretend it hasn't happened, to the extent that that child continues to be exposed to that person that their parents now know has been abuser.
And have to maintain a relationship.
And can you imagine the repeat trauma that person is going to every time they see that person?
It's utterly shocking. And what we decided, because this kind of came up in discussion when we were prepping for this show, we decided we're going to dedicate a show talking about the issues around physical violations of vulnerable people, the impact it has on that vulnerable person, the impact it has on the family, and actually what you can do to support such a person, or if you are a person who has been exposed to such an atrocity, what you can do and where you can get support. So we'll do that show in a couple of weeks, we were thinking, definitely. Inshallah. Because I think our community is too afraid to speak about this and spending far too much time allowing young people, vulnerable people to suffer in silence, and it's impacting other aspects of their life. And it's not okay.
It's not okay. And it's not okay. Extremely common.
It's extremely common. And it's not just not okay, in terms of on the earthly level, because it's not fair on the individual, and it's like an added atrocity upon that person, but also if it's your child or a child that is under your care or has experienced this. Children are a trust from God. They're an amana, and we have a duty to protect them at all costs. And sometimes out of what we, inverted commas, call shame and, fear of relationships, because it was your brother's daughter or son or your brother or your uncle or your, or your aunt who carried out the atrocity, for sake of maintaining family ties, children or vulnerable people are allowed to suffer in silence, and it's not okay. And people need to start to say it's not okay,
and to be empowered to be able to speak about it openly. And we know of situations where a person has committed such an act against a young child, been thrown out of the house, but because it didn't go any further, it wasn't reported, the community wasn't informed about it, he moved in with another family and did the same thing to another young girl.
Yes.
And this is, again, and it's a horrendous situation where now, because people were not willing to speak up, another child who could have been
suffered,
protected, and another child has suffered, and who knows how many more. Who knows how many more.
And within that show, we will also talk about how, as a parent, you can educate your child in keeping themselves safe, but also keeping others safe. And like a basic protocols that you can have in place to try and protect your children and try and protect other children. But that's like a conversation for another show. Let's come back to our show today, talking about forgiveness. And we left off asking the question, well, we spoke about the question is the impact that the impact not forgiving has upon our body. And we left off saying that when something happens to us that is negative, a negative experience, or some sort of conflict we have experienced, it puts us in an agitated state. And when we are in an agitated state, we go into what Dr. Ruqia was sharing with us.
The parasympathetic state, where you are in the state of fight or flight, and we mentioned two others, but let's stick with the fight and flight for now. But basically it has a real physical impact on your body. So you'll notice that your breathing is fast, for example, your blood pressure goes up, your heart is beating much faster, so you might feel palpitations. It can make you feel lightheaded because blood is going to your limbs more than to your head. Blood is diverted away from your gut, so you start experiencing gut disorders, high blood pressure, heart disease. All of these things start happening because you're in that state of fight or flight, and you feel this sense of agitation, and it is a very difficult state to be in. It feels unhealthy, and it is unhealthy long term.
And that's the thing, isn't it, is when someone becomes stuck in that state. Because when you get stuck in that state, they're essentially doing is being in a state of adrenaline. And so the negative health consequences for not forgiving and not letting go are high blood pressure, heart problems, anxiety, depression, having a low immune response, a kind of like a weaker blood flow.
And things like infertility, hormonal health issues, all of these things. Right, exactly.
Gut issues,
diabetes, all of these things have stress, and this state of being in fight and flight have an impact on all of these factors. So when we're talking about these conditions and healing from them, letting go of certain things that are keeping you in that state are going to be really important.
So let's hear this out. Let's put this in black and white. What we are saying is, when you don't forgive, you're holding on to that state of agitation and conflict. And when you hold on to that state of agitation and conflict over a period of time, that's when the physical health, negative health issues start to manifest, the ones that we've mentioned. So what are we saying here? Are we now taking back our words about you don't have to forgive everyone, and saying actually you do need to forgive everyone to be in health?
No.
No, we are not.
We are not. And I think there is a little bit of a distinction between letting go and forgiving.
Forgiveness, yeah. It's because it goes back to what we expect forgiveness to be. We expect forgiveness, forgive and forget, forgive and forget, forgive and forget. From a religious perspective, you're encouraged to do that. And from a societal perspective, the higher moral value is to forgive and forget. But we are not talking about forgetting when we are talking about forgiving. When we are talking about forgiving, we are really only talking about letting go. And when we talk about forgiving as letting go, forgiving is no longer about the other person.
It's about
forgiving is about you.
And there might be
You know
situations.
what? I was building that up, and then you just did you notice that? Did you notice I was building it up, and then Dr. Ruqia just like, it's about you. She stole that moment from me.
Sorry, I thought we were saying it together for extra emphasis.
No, I'm joking.
And I want to add here that taken like that, when we're looking at that kind of forgiveness,
Yeah.
you can forgive someone but still feel that they need to be held accountable
Yeah.
and to be brought to justice.
Yes.
And that's
yes.
important, because that comes back to the forgiving part is about you.
Mhm.
The holding them to justice part is whether they can repeat that behavior to somebody else, to you or to somebody else.
Mhm.
And I think you can, the two of them can coexist. Forgiving in that sense doesn't mean that that other person got away with it or should get away with
never,
it.
ever. Forgiving never means that the other person gets away with it. Forgiving, the forgiveness that we are talking about, is about you and letting go. By letting go, again, we go back to what forgiveness is not. It is not about reconciling. It's not about pretending that it didn't happen. It's not about making out that what happened was okay. It's not about allowing it to happen again. It's not about pretending that or playing down that traumatic experience. No, it's about letting go. So you might be wondering, what does letting go look like, and what does it mean? And we're going to go into that. But before we look at that, we're going to look at some of the health benefits of letting go. Can I say forgiveness of letting go? Okay, guys, we're going to have a vote. Okay, so I wanted to call this type of forgiveness, I wanted to call it the forgiveness of letting go. Don't say anything yet.
Okay, go ahead.
When
So
I say
explain
to
yourself.
you, I'm not going to explain myself because everyone understands, right? So when I say to you, forgiveness of letting go, does that make sense to you?
Brother Asim, you.
He's saying no. I'm so
No,
annoyed.
he said no.
I'm so annoyed. Please tell me there's people out there who are agreeing with me that forgiveness
think like
of
you.
letting go
Right?
makes sense, because it makes complete, utter sense to me, although it makes no grammatic sense. But why does it need to make grammatic sense is the question. To make sense
yeah.
of it. So the reason why I wanted to coin this phrase, forgiveness of letting go, is because we really want to move away from using the word forgiveness, because it's really difficult to separate ourselves from forgive and forget. But we want to separate ourselves from forgive and forget. We want to call it something else. Maybe you have a name. Please share it.
Letting go. Yeah. Brother Asim says just call it letting go.
That's boring.
I said that, and Madhia said that's too boring.
That's boring. There's not
Madhia likes the
dramatic.
exciting life.
There's not enough drama.
I thought this is all about letting go of drama.
There's healthy drama. We need some vitality in our lives.
Okay, we'll have to think about that one.
This is work in progress, because one vote is not all votes.
Well, it's 2 votes now.
Okay, there's two, you two and me. So still, can you come online and maybe support me here? I've got two
Come on,
people
please,
against
someone.
me. So the number is 01733 602 133, 074 1119 1062. That's to text. Or you can comment, and which is quite easy to do, on live stream on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch. But if you're going to agree with them, you don't need to share your thoughts.
Please do. So we were talking about what that state looks like when you're holding on and you're not able to let go of it. So you're in a state of adrenaline essentially, and we mentioned the health consequences of being in that state. What it does is it zaps your energy, because it puts your energy into holding on to this thing, and it puts your energy. I mean, you've already mentioned physiologically what's happening, but in the same way, emotionally, your energies are all concentrated in holding on to this thing, which means that you might be missing out on creative energy. There's so much that you can be putting that energy to that's not happening.
So you're likely to be held back in life, because you probably can't perform as well at work or studies, or even in relationships, or just enjoy where you are, whether you've gone out into nature or experienced something with your family or friends. The degree to which you are present will be compromised, because some of your presence, in inverted commas, is with the perpetrator and the pain and the trauma.
Yeah. So going back to the bodily benefits, then there have been lots of excellent studies that have looked at what forgiveness does to the body and to our health, and they've observed that people's blood pressure is lower when they are able to forgive. They report they need fewer medications, they have better sleep, they physically feel better in themselves and have fewer physical complaints, for example, pain. They generally have better circulation, which means that a lot of those conditions that we associate with poor circulation or issues with your circulation, like heart disease, for example, those things are going to get better as well. So you can see that, we've mentioned this throughout this the shows that we've done so far. Any kind of situation like this, these things are not just on an emotional level. They have an impact on us on multiple levels, including what's happening in the body itself. And you can see why, there are tangible studies that show us something like forgiveness that we do not think of as a physical thing actually has an impact on your physical body.
So the first step to actually letting go, forgiveness of letting go.
I have no idea what that means. If you're confused, so am I.
I'm going to have to find another phrase. I need to coin something else. Okay, so the first step of letting go is knowing that you can forgive without condoning what happened. And certainly the healthiest thing is to forgive. Like physically, the healthiest thing is to forgive. By that we mean to let go. So again, what we're talking about, I know you might think that we're encouraging you to forgive, although a little while ago we said that, there are situations in which, you can't really forgive. But we're asking you to think about letting go. But even as we're asking you to think about letting go, don't force yourself to let go and don't force yourself to forgive, and don't force others, because if you force someone else to forgive or let go, you can intrude on that process of forgiveness. So people, sometimes say that you need to be a good person, you need to forgive your sister, your dad, your uncle, your auntie, your mother. But the problem is that when an outside force is telling you what you need to do or is deciding for you what's the right thing to do, it doesn't have the same benefit. And in fact, it can be counterproductive, as you were mentioning, because it can actually then add to the trauma.
And as we said right at the beginning, forgiveness is a process. And there are things that have to happen before you get to the point where you're able to fully let it go.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be processing the trauma itself, making some kind of meaning out of it, being able to understand what impact it's had, how it's holding you back. And unless you've been through that process and you're coerced by yourself or by others into a position where you need to let it go, it's not going to happen. You're not truly going to let it go.
You may let it go for a temporary period of time,
or it might be superficial,
or a pseudo letting go.
Yeah. But it's not going to be a true letting go.
So
it's not going to be permanent.
So it's not going to have the positive impacts on your body.
It's not going to have any
on your
benefits,
health.
Yeah.
So you might be in a situation where you're thinking, I'm not ready to let go. Your mind is not ready to let go. Your heart is not ready to let go. But letting go is important for your health benefits. We're going to talk about, next week, we're going to talk about different ways in which you can let go. But this week, we want to just focus on how you can get your body ready to let go if you feel like you're not, or even if you do feel like you are ready to let go. If this whole idea of thinking good of that other person, trying to make excuses for them, trying to reframe what happened. Maybe you overreacted in a situation. I'm not talking again about violations of the body and physical abuse and violence. I'm just talking about that's the side of the spectrum where we're looking at misunderstandings. So if we're on that side of the spectrum where misunderstandings have happened, it's really important that we assess ourselves. Okay, so because we all bring our own perspective onto a situation, and it's really difficult to leave that behind when you judge a situation, but it's so crucial for our health and for our relationships to be able to do that, and it takes training. But it's training that's well worth investing in. And so what you need to do is know that whenever you have a feeling that comes from a place of anger, that feeling is not true. Because as we know, anger comes from Satan, and anger physically actually well, at the least, it blurs our vision, but at worst, it can change the color of our vision. So something could be white. You could either see it a bit blurry and it's not clear, or you could see it as black. And so whatever you're feeling or whatever judgments you're making in that moment of anger, they are going to be away from the truth. So you need to step away and wait until your calm has returned. When your calm has returned, and the next step takes a lot of training, you need to look at the situation from the other person's perspective, because we are all engineered differently. The truth and what is right is not black and white. There's a whole spectrum of colors, and so there's a whole spectrum of realities, and so there's a whole spectrum of perspectives. So what may seem like a outright, wrong to you may be an outright right to someone else.
It's really interesting. I mean, I'm sure other people have experienced this too, but if you've ever been in a situation where two people have had a disagreement, or, a situation like this where one person feels like they've been in some way harmed or emotionally hurt, you'll notice that the two people, I'm thinking of a situation where two people were having an argument, and I was a witness, and then
it wasn't me.
No, it wasn't. And then later, I was in a situation where each of those two people were telling a third person what had happened. Neither of them were lying, but their version was completely different. Because it was just about how they understood certain intonations, how they understood what meaning they gave to a certain phrase, etc. And it was completely different meanings taken from the same situation. Neither of them were making anything up. There was no lying going on here. They just had completely different understandings of the same situation.
Because they gave their own meaning to that situation.
Right. We all wear colored lenses all the time based on our life experience, right? And being able to sometimes understand that this is going on for me, but that's my reality. That's what I've seen. But it doesn't mean that's what the other person has seen.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the biggest lessons and the best lessons we can learn in life, is to understand that these perspectives are equally right. And actually the better thing to do is to empathize with the other person. And really the person of depth and the person that is rich in personality and in what we call good character is a person who can look at situations from the other person's perspective at all times.
It takes a great degree of maturity and
training.
And training.
Don't think I can't do that, and so I can't do that. Like, full stop, that's not me. No. We can all attain that. It takes training to get
practice.
there. It takes practice to maintain it, because you can get there and then lose it again if you experience some sort of trauma. And so the first thing is, don't judge in anger. Second thing is to look at the other person's perspective. And so when you're looking from the other person's perspective, genuinely try to see the good in what they were doing. You're going to open yourself up to a new world with new colors. Imagine a paint that's been painted. I'm just looking at something in the station. It's on the wall and it's just black and red. I'm not saying it's not nice. It's interesting. It's like one of those abstract pieces. But imagine if it was given lots of different color. It'll be given lots of different meaning, and it'll have greater depth and greater character. Yeah. And that is true for people as well. When you allow yourself to have different perspectives and you inculcate different colors on the spectrum, then you'll be of a greater character and be able to have better relationships. And really, it's going to be win-win for you, because you're going to feel better about yourself. You're going to feel better about other people. So life is going to feel better. That's one of the secrets of the good life.
Yeah.
So, if having said that, you are still not ready, then there's something that you can actually do, an activity that you can do. And this is the tip of this week.
Do you want to go through it, or should I?
You go ahead.
Okay, so this is as we said, the impact of forgiving, not being able to forgive, the impact of holding on is felt in the body. So this is about what you can do with the body to try and move yourself out of that state of agitation, of adrenaline, moving into a state of regulation, And that's when we start, when in that state of regulation, we start to see things from alternative perspective. We start to see things a bit more clearly.
Yeah. So basically, when we are in agitation, we are in what we call the sympathetic mode, which is, fight, flight, to simplify it. But let's say we want to go and not feel that, then we need to do relaxation. So how can we do it? We've got 60 seconds.
Okay, so this is a progressive muscle relaxation, and basically you're progressively relaxing different muscles in the body. So what you do is you start with the hands and the forearms. You clench your hands into a fist. You raise your eyebrows up as much as you can. You go into your upper arms. You raise each forearm, flex your biceps, make a muscle.
So basically what it sounds like is you tighten the muscles. You tighten
all the muscles.
And then you relax them.
And then you relax them. And the reason you do tighten them first and you relax them is because when you notice the contrast, that's when you realize what relaxation feels like. Otherwise, we can often think we are relaxed and we're not.
Brilliant.
So you do the constriction first and then you do the relaxation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was a great doing this show today. We look forward to talking to you next week.
Beginners Part 2.
Thank you.